to learn how to edit images in Photoshop and learn how to cut someone out of a photo and overlay them in edited image. So first, you're going to need to open Photoshop. I know my Photoshop looks different than your Photoshop. It is all basically the same, but you just need to make sure you're paying attention to all the steps. And the first thing you're going to do is make sure that you have your image of your landscape that has no people in it. So this is mine, and a photo of yourself. Now you need to be able to see the eyes in this so that you can follow along with all parts of the lesson. So the first thing you need to do is drag the landscape photo onto the Photoshop icon. Now the first thing that you should do is unlock the layer. Now when you unlock the layer, that allows you to make changes without anything looking strange or odd, because if you lock it, you won't be able to do anything to it. And if you try to force it, weird stuff's going to happen. You're not going to like it, and you're going to email me going, Miss Jen, what happened? So make sure you do that first. The second thing you should do is go to Image, Image Size. And you want to change the fit to from original size, which is the size of the photo, to A4 for this project. Now you're going to see here that the size is not exactly A4 size because the width would be 210. However, it fits the constraints of my image, so I'm just going to click OK. Now remember, if you are working with a square image, that you need to click this constraint aspect ratio lock button and just enter in 210. That way, you still get the larger image, but it doesn't stretch or warp your image in any way. Hit OK, and then it will automatically resize. It might zoom in, it might zoom out depending on what your image size is like. But you can pinch and pull on the mouse pad or hit Command plus or minus to zoom in out. I honestly recommend you pinching and pulling. You get a much more accurate kind of feel on the zoom rather than the jerky motion of Command Z, Command minus, Command plus. It's a little bit jerkier. You have a little less control over how far in you zoom in. So what you need to do next is duplicate the layer. So you right click and either click on duplicate layer, rename it. So I'm just renaming mine duplicate layer. Or another way you can duplicate the layer is dragging it onto the new layer button, and that will automatically do that for you. So I'm going to delete one of these because I only need one duplicate layer. So yes, delete the copy. You can either drag it onto the trash can or you can hit the delete key to delete a layer. Now what I'm going to do so I can make sure that I see all the changes going on is I'm going to turn the bottom layer off so that all the changes I make to this layer here, I can see. So, and if I end up erasing anything, then I can see what I'm erasing and what I'm not. This is just here in case the duplicate layer is just there in case I mess up and I need to restart instead of having to undo everything. So there are two ways to edit an image in Photoshop. The first way is to go to Image Adjustments and then go into the different menus from there. This will directly apply to the layer. And so if you end up not liking what you do to the layer, you will have to undo or go back in history to undo. Now, I'll click on levels, and this is a histogram of all the black, gray, and white in the image. And you can mess around here. Just take a moment to mess with the levels if you want it darker, if you want it lighter. I do highly recommend that you work at a full screen brightness so you can see what's going on, so you can make sure everything's looking good, because if you have a very dim screen, it is very hard to tell what is going on in your image and if the levels of light look good. Now, I'm actually going to hit cancel because I don't recommend doing this. It makes it really hard to delete things later, so what we're actually going to do instead is click on the adjustment layer button. Now, what this will do is actually create a new layer on top of the layer you want to edit, and that's how then it will apply the changes in that way. So, for example, if I click on it, then I will get another menu. It's the same menu, and I will go back to the levels menu and see how it created a new layer. This layer is now linked with this photo layer. And so all of the changes that I make in this levels layer will directly apply to the photo layer, except for if I make a mistake or decide later that I don't want to use the changes that I made in this layer, then I can delete it without having to undo anything. So I'm just going to mess around a little bit here and adjust the levels of gray, black, and white to my liking. And when I'm satisfied, I will hit the menu button up here, and the menu will slide back in, and now I'm satisfied. Something else you can do is play with the hue and saturation, and it created a separate layer for that itself. So see how everything is labeled, and it is very important to label your layers, because here is the hue and saturation layer, here's the levels layer, here's the what I labeled the duplicate layer. If you want to change the layer name, you can double click here on the name and rename it. So I'm typing that this is the original image. Then I just click elsewhere and then it saves. Now at this point, I do recommend you saving this. And when you do that, you need to make sure you save it as a Photoshop document, because if you want to go back in later and make any changes, if you save it as any other format, it's going to compress the files and get rid of the layers. So you can't delete any layers, you're just stuck with the image that you have. So it's really not, you would have to go through the original image again and make all of the edits again, rather than just going into the Photoshop document, which is this format right here, format Photoshop. And that's the best. You need to make sure you save all of your Photoshop documents in case later on you decide that you want to edit or go back and edit them. You also need to be aware of where you're saving your document, and you need to give it a proper name. So I would call this one Experiment 1. And for now, I'm going to save it on my desktop so that later I can know where it is and move it into the appropriate folder. Now it will give you this pop-up when you save for the first time. Don't mess with anything, just hit OK. And you will see here that it's saving and how big the file is. Now see, it already popped up on my desktop here, and it's labeled a PSD Photoshop document. And so you need to make sure that you move that to an appropriate folder later on. So back to hue and saturation. Hue will change the overall color and change the tint of the, it will tint with a color for the photograph. So wherever you move the slider, it's going to move. So it's moving pinkish, it's turning more blue. I think I'm going to move it so it's a little bit not that blue or green, just a little cooler. and I'll get it just how I want it. You can also type in the numbers here if you know what number you want it set on. Most of the time you're going to play with the slider bar unless you are batch editing photos. Then you are going to go to the saturation. You are never going to take it to 100% saturation. It looks awful. Instead, what you're going to do, I would go no further. I would dare to go no further than probably 30 on the plus side of saturation. However, you can go all the way to the negative 100 side of saturation and completely desaturate it. It will just turn your image into a black and white image. If you do that, I suggest you go back into levels and play with that so that you can get the grays and whites and blacks very crisp so that you don't have any of this like muddy gray like I do right here. So when I saturate an image, I usually keep it between 0 and 15. I don't want it too saturated, it looks fake, it's obvious. And then the last thing here is the lightness. Now, I honestly recommend that you don't play with this just because we already played with the levels of lightness and whites and grays with the levels. If you want to go back and change that, you just click on levels again and the menu will pop up. Now, as you can see with my image, that there's a lot of green water here. It's not exactly appealing. So what I'm going to do is change the water from green to purple. I know it makes sense, right? So what I'm going to do is create a new layer, and I'm going to make sure it's on top. Now layer order matters, because if these layers here were underneath this photo layer, you wouldn't see any of the changes. So I'm going to move the layers down just to show you. So now you can't see anything. It looks like I did nothing. So now I'm going to move them back up and you can see the changes again. So layer order matters. Whatever you want more visible, you want it on top. So it's kind of like a sandwich in that sense. Whatever's on the bottom, you're really not going to see. And as you keep layering it, the less you're going to see of that bottom layer. In this case, the bottom layer is the photo, and the edits that we're making that are the cheese or whatever that make up the insides of the sandwich, you can still see the bottom layer, but it is definitely altered. So what we're going to do from here is add a new layer, make sure it's on the very top, and I'm going to label this river because that's what I'm coloring. So what I'm going to do is get the paintbrush tool and turn it on, and I'm going to make it larger so that I can fill the river pretty fast because I don't want to spend too much time on this because I'm not going to keep this image later. So I'm going to quickly outline, I can come back and erase the edges later if I feel like I should do that. And I'm going to fill this in, and you're probably wondering like what the heck, she's crazy. What is going on? She's making this look so fake. It looks awful. Now, in fact, it does look awful, but how to make it more natural is you go over back to your layers palette and you play with the opacity of that layer. And so I'm moving the opacity down until I feel that it looks natural enough where you can see enough of the reflection and enough of the color where you feel like that it is natural. And at this point, I would go back in with the eraser and erase around the edges, but I really don't see the need because I'm not keeping the image. So what you're going to do now is make sure you save this again because we are pausing. And you always want to save Photoshop documents no matter what. Anything can happen. It can crash at any time. I've told you this a million times. Photoshop is your frenemy. And you don't want to be left in a position where you just lose all of your work and you have to restart all over again. So what you're going to do now is you're going to drag the image of yourself. So the first thing we're going to do, once again, is unlock the layer. If you leave the layer locked, which I'm going to lock it again because I'm going to show you what's going to happen if you leave the layer locked. So I'm going to change my image. So go to image size, change it from original size to A4. So in this case, it really zooms in. Once again, this is still not 210 by 297, but it's close enough, and you just want it to at least fit in one of the parameters. Hit OK. This is really going to zoom in. So what I'm going to do is we are going to use the magic wand tool first. Default settings is going to be under quick selection tool. So you press and hold down and click on magic wand tool. This is a very, very crude tool. This is just like a preliminary tool that I use to clean up the backgrounds from an image if I just want to cut and crop the people out. So what you do is you click on an area and it will automatically highlight. Now you need to be careful with this because it will, here, let me show you. Actually, this is doing too good of a job right now. So here. So if you aren't careful, you will accidentally highlight and create a path of marching ants on parts that you don't want. What you want is to create an outline around yourself or the person that you're cropping out. And you can see here that this grabbed a whole bunch of my hair, which is not what I want. And so you need to be careful of that because that's how you end up with missing patches of your head or lumps or just missing feet. That was really popular, a very popular problem. So you need to make sure that you're using this and keeping an eye on the parameters of this. So I'm going to go back over here and you can see that it is selected around my shoulder and it does select around my hair here. And watch closely because I'm going to hit delete and remember that my layer is still locked. Oh look, I hit delete and nothing happened. And that's what, and for some people it might not do anything. For some people you might get this weird repetitive thing and you won't understand what's happening. This is most likely what's wrong, is that you still have the layer locked. So I'm going to unlock it and now I'm going to hit delete for real this time. And see how it deleted that whole area. And now what's left is this checkered pattern. So this checkered pattern means that there's nothing there and that that area of the photo is transparent. So what you're going to do is keep clicking around the image and hitting delete and keeping an eye on the marching ants to make sure they are not overlapping anything that they shouldn't. And you are just going to do this until you can't get any closer without cutting yourself out or cutting a part of you out. So I've gotten there. So if you get this and you don't know what to do, hit Command D and that will deselect. Now what we're going to do now is go to the magnetic lasso tool. So your default on Photoshop is going to be this lasso tool here. It's above the wand tool. And you can actually use this first instead of the magic wand tool if you'd like. I just wanted to show you how the magic wand tool worked. But with the magic lasso tool, you're going to hold the button down again and select the magnetic lasso tool. So what you're going to do is start off by clicking at one point and slowly start dragging it and clicking where needed to help create a path for your selection. This is going to be long and tedious because you have to line everything up and you are going to click to make sure that everything is lining up how it should be. Now you can also hover your mouse along the edge, and Photoshop will do its best guessing where, you know, the edge detecting, it will do its best to detect the edge, but just a warning, it does not do a phenomenal job. It actually doesn't even do an okay job. Most of the time it does a poor job, especially where the hair is concerned. So what you need to make sure you're doing is help guiding it, and you also want to make sure that if you can't get it exactly on, you want to make sure that the line isn't going in over any part of your hair or body, because then it will automatically take that out of the selection. What you want to do if you can't get a perfect selection is just get a rough selection outside. See here how it doesn't line up with my face? That's okay. I will show you another way in just a moment when I'm done with this. To help clean up some of that mess. But it is better to go out too wide than accidentally digging in and creating a huge dent on your forehead. So I'm just going along the bottom here and then the side so I can reconnect it at the end here. And I click on that first point. Now, if I were to delete this now, I have selected myself. So if I delete it, I'm deleting myself. So Command Z, Command Option Z, or you can even go back in history and click there to the point that you want to go back to, which is making sure that your face is still there. And you are going to right click and select Inverse. So what that will do is select everything else so that you can just automatically delete the background. Easy peasy. Now what you're going to do from here is Command D, deselect, because nothing else will work if it is deselected. If it is selected or have the path or marching ants around it. And you are going to select the eraser tool. Now it's going to be tedious, but you need to make sure the marching ants are off, because if you have them on, you won't be able to erase. So this part's going to be a bit tedious. This is a bit more detailed oriented, but you can go in with the eraser and just clean up some spots that you couldn't get right next to. So you also want to make sure any artifacts are gone, because when you are cutting someone out and you have these little specks of color, it looks sloppy and it's then makes it super obvious that it was photoshopped. So I'm just going to call this good for the sake of time. And what I'm going to do now is Command Save. And I am actually going to save it first as a Photoshop document. So I'm going to change it to cut out head and save it to my desktop as a Photoshop document, because you want to make sure you save it as a Photoshop document in case you want to make any changes later. Hit OK. It's saved. Now I'm going to go back and save as. There are two ways to do this process. So you can save as and then change the file to a PNG and save it like that. Hit OK. Or it's still saving. Down here is where it's going to tell you the percent saved. Or you can go to File, Export, Quick Export as PNG. You want to make sure that you export anything that you have as a cutout as a PNG, because it will make sure that this transparent background that you worked so hard to get stays transparent. So when you drag your head like this onto your landscape like this, that the background is still transparent because you worked so hard for that. Congratulations on making it this far. So what you're going to do from here is size it. So if you hold shift and then you play with the arrows, it will keep your image the same size, constrained to that same size, and it will make it larger or smaller depending on what you want. You can also move it around. Once you are happy with a place that you have it, press enter, and there it is. Now notice how this also created a new layer. And if you are unhappy with the placement or change your mind later, hit Command T. This will transform your image so you have that box again. If you hold shift, you can make it larger. If you don't hold shift, weird stuff's gonna happen. You're gonna stretch, this is not the way you wanna look skinny. But you wanna make sure you hold shift, move it where you want it, hit OK or enter, and there you go. Now you want to also make sure that this is on the top layer, because once again, if this is under, you can see how this now overlaps here. And since I put these under the hue and saturation and levels layers, now that those adjustments also affect the photo of my face. Now, one thing I forgot to do before I exported this image was, first you're going to want to change the layer from being a smart object and rasterize it. So you're going to hit OK. And you're going to want to zoom in. Now, I'm choosing the same color as the river because I can't be bothered to choose a different color. But what we are going to do now is change your eye color. I'm going down to a 11 pixel brush and getting in nice and close and making sure I color just the iris of my eye. I want to leave my pupil black because I want to look normal, as normal as you get with purple eyes, almost natural. I want to make sure that I'm not getting it on the eyelids because I wanted to have that illusion of it staying within the eye. Going to do the same thing for the other side. Make sure your hardness is set probably around 18%. You don't want too sharp of an edge, that way everything kind of blends and fades naturally. And we're going to do something similar to the eyes like we did with the river. And so I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Wow, those pupils look horrible. I'm going to take my eraser, go down to a size 11, really quick, give it a nice touch up. Now here, my mistake that I did was that I did not create a new layer. So when I erased to the background of the photo rather than my eyes. So I'm going to go back in history and go back all the way to layer order because I don't need to rasterize the layer if I'm going to make a new layer over top. And I'm going to make a new layer over top. And I'm going to zoom in and color my eyes again. Now, this part is completely optional because you are going to be ending up uploading this to Schoology, to the Media or Photoshop Experiments media gallery, and you can see everyone else's. So this time I did a better job of keeping my pupils. This one I'm going to touch up a little bit because it looks a little rough. And so when I erase this time, it erases to the eye rather than the background. I'll touch this one up a little bit too since I did the other one. I'm going to zoom out just enough so you can see both eyes, and I am going to play with the layer opacity. So this is at 73, still looks unnatural. I mean, it's purple eyes, it's going to look unnatural. But once I'm down to 39%, they look a little bit more like contacts. And as I get down to about 25%, that's about good, because you still want to be able to see the purple, but you don't want to look like an alien. You want it to be subtle enough where it looks like it possibly could be, but you know in reality that it's not true. So from there, you are going to save this as a JPEG. You're going to go to File, File Save As, change the format to JPEG, not JPEG 2000 or JPEG Stereo or any of these other formats, just JPEG. You're going to make sure this is where you want it saved, what the title is. You need to make sure you give it a proper title so that you know what file is what. And so you're not constantly guessing, because that just takes up time. Now, another way to save it as a JPEG is once again go to File, then you go to Export and Export As. Now my computer's a little slow today, but once you click on Export As, this will come up. It's processing. You can change it from PNG to JPEG and go from there. But it is much faster, in my opinion, to just go to Save As, save, change the format to JPEG. I'm keeping mine as Experiment 1. Save. Now I'm going to open up Schoology. Ignore my kitten. And I'm going to go to Schoology, go to the art class, go down to animation, go to Introduction to Photoshop. Now I know there's two things here. One says Media Gallery, and it's been quite confusing for everyone, but this is just the assignment. Here is the actual Media Gallery, Photoshop Experiment. So it says, please share your experiment. And over here you would click Media and make sure you attach the JPEG file. Schoology does not take PSD or Photoshop document, and I want to get you in the habit of exporting as JPEG unless you have the background cut out and you have transparent areas. That is the only time that you would save as a PNG. Now, I'm not actually going to upload this. Thank you very much for watching.